Guten Abend, herzlich willkommen in Mutz. Ich hoffe, Ihnen hat der Film gefallen. Es ist natürlich nicht das Gleiche, wenn man ein Konzert von Recoil sieht, aber es ist sehr, sehr nah dran. Ich hoffe, es war auch laut genug, weil auch das muss sein, es muss laut sein. Ich möchte vielleicht mal kurz erzählen, vielleicht auch mein Verhältnis zu Recoil und zu Alan Wilder. Ich kenne ihn jetzt seit 25 Jahren ungefähr, weil ich habe früher eine Band gemanagt, die ist Fat Gadget, die erinnert euch vielleicht noch daran, das war die Band, bei der eigentlich Depeche Mode wurde entdeckt als Vorgruppe bei Fat Gadget, das war 1977, 78 oder sowas. Und seitdem sind wir eigentlich in Kontakt, seit den 80er Jahren, dann Mitte 80er Jahre, und haben uns immer wieder getroffen. Ich habe auch bei einem seiner Album mitgemacht, ihr hört es vielleicht wie heißt dieses Album? Liquid, da war ich Erzähler. Und Alan Wilder ist ja vor allem bekannt geworden als Mitglied von Depeche Mode. Da ist er 1982 hat er dort angefangen, hat sich auf ein Inserat beworben, als Vince Clarke ausgestiegen ist aus der Zeit und dann Erasure angefangen hat zu machen, mit Assembly, mit Fergal Sharkey und so weiter und so fort. Das ist ein ganzes Netzwerk, das daraus entstanden ist. Recoil lief seit 1986 immer parallel zu Depeche Mode. Warum das so ist, das werde ich ihn fragen, weil es ist doch ein bisschen was anderes, als Depeche Mode gemacht hat. Es war viel düsterer, es war viel avantgardistischer und das war als Gegenpol eigentlich von Depeche Mode. Ich möchte auch gar nicht mehr lange warten und Sie auf die Folter spannen. Bitte heißen Sie ganz herzlich willkommen. Please welcome on stage Alan Wilder.
Guten Abend. How are you?
So I've been telling everyone that we know each other for quite some time.
Yeah, too long.
Too long, actually, yes. And we had our times, and I'm very happy that you're here. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for this film, which was fantastic visually. I mean, as the Recoil shows are, but it's very difficult to have a fantastic show put on film. So, and I think your Hungarian friends, the filmmaker, his name escapes me, did a really good job, I think.
His name is Attila.
Attila
Herko. But firstly, I'll tell you about him. No, he's the voice on the beginning of one of the Recoil albums. Some of you probably know that already. And you can tell he has a big set of lungs. So when he came to visit us in England in, where was it, end of 99, I think, something like that. I thought, oh, he'd be the perfect voice to narrate the intro to Liquid. But we go back much further than that still, because he used to work for Intercord Records in Germany, where Depeche Mode were licensed. So I think we met kind of in the 80s, didn't we?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Anyway, so he's very kindly invited me here to Zurich a couple of times now. Last time when we played the show here at Kaufleuten, and then again tonight for this. And in fact, he was the very first person to ask whether we could do a screening for this event, for this film. So I'm very happy to be here, and I hope you enjoyed what you saw. When he describes this film and talk, that kind of implies that I'm supposed to do some kind of lecture here, and really I'm just here to answer any questions anyone has, because it's pretty obvious what the film is. Doesn't really need much explanation.
Well, we won't leave you off that easily. Yeah. And there are some questions I'd like to ask you, obviously, and
yes.
I'd like to structure it a little bit. It's very difficult, if you know someone very well, it's very difficult to make some sensible questions. And I will structure it.
Especially with your cold.
It is, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm totally blocked. So there's a past, there's a present, and there's a future, and maybe we can go along that line. I mean, the past, obviously, when you started Recoil, you were still pretty much entangled in the Depeche working. And why did you do that? Didn't you have enough work with Depeche that you needed something else to do?
Well, we did actually take some breaks here and there, and at the time I was very into recording as much as possible. So I thought that would be a great opportunity for me to do a few other different things at that time. So when we took a natural break in the band, I would carry on in the studio and just make some music of my own. And I've really always been passionate about making music and trying to devote as much time to it as possible. It's not quite so easy these days with a little bit more of a complicated life and 3 children now and all these things. So I can't spend all my time in the studio, but in those days I could, so that's why I started Recoil, and there was no reason to stop it really, whether it was during the Depeche Mode time or as it transpired when I continued afterwards. You know?
You're of opinion that you influenced Depeche with your Recoil work at all, or was it completely different from the way of working?
I'm not sure. There was, I mean, obviously because my involvement in the studio was very much in the production side, then of course the two things kind of influenced each other. But Martin's songs are so different to the kind of music that Recoil does, or the songs, if we even call them songs, that Recoil makes. You know, they're not your standard kind of structure that Martin tends to write in. So, but once you go beyond that and you go into the arrangement and the structure and the sound use, then of course there's a lot of links between, you know, the Recoil music and Depeche Mode at that time. Especially the later Depeche Mode period, Violator, Songs of Faith and Devotion, where I guess I had more influence on those albums than the earlier ones.
They turned to be darker as well, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a horrible, nasty darkness inside me somewhere.
You're a very dark person as well. But tell us, how do you work? How do you work on Recoil? I mean, you have the first idea, or I mean, for example, with Liquid, I think it was, you had this sort of blues bands playing on every track, and then you put everything on.
Yeah, that album we employed a group of musicians, and I asked them just to jam in the studio. And then I'm like a sponge. I need other people's input and performances, but then I want to control it and put it all together. So it seemed a good idea to get a load of musicians to just play a load of stuff and record everything, and then I would take it away. And it's that process I really enjoy, of just playing around with lots of source material and using what I know about sort of orchestration and structure to put it together in a meaningful way, or something that pleases me. So I've always done that, but it's mainly, I mean, I never have any ideas at the beginning of an album. I just sort of start mucking about and playing around with samples and loops, and gradually something starts to form, you know? So you never really know.
So, I mean, Recoil was always a studio project, wasn't it? It was
yes,
never.
It was, yeah. It took 25 years to take it on the road, you know.
That's why we are in the present now. I mean, why on earth do we put that on a stage and
Well, some people would ask, why did you put that on the stage? Because it's not a traditional kind of band setup, is it? And I guess we see a lot more of this these days, using laptop and film. The reason that Recoil never went on the road before, it just wasn't really technically viable. You know, it was maybe possible if you had a lot of funding, but, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we couldn't have put that kind of thing together for a cost-effective, you know, in a cost-effective way. These days, you've got much, much cheaper technology, better quality, small HD cameras. People can make films for almost nothing if they have the desire and the creativity, you know. So I saw a possibility, once we put together this selected album, to actually present this thing in a sort of live context, and that's how it came together. But like most of my things, it kind of evolved. I didn't have all these ideas, you know. I just collected together people. I enjoy people that are proactive. I've formed a lot of good relations through the various Recoil forums with people who are very enthusiastic and want to work, and maybe don't require a lot of payment for doing so. They do it out of love, you know. So I encourage those people. There's 4 different filmmakers within the stage film there, and then you've got another group of filmmakers that made the final concert film. So, and then there's another group of Hungarians that also did all the artwork, and they all did it for nothing, which is remarkable, you know, and I'm very grateful for that fact. And just to talk a little bit about this film for a moment, it wasn't really an intentional, you know, idea. I mean, it came together all by accident, really. You know, the film crew turned up on the day of the show, and I didn't even know they were going to be there. And then they just introduced themselves, a selection of 7 people with all these really state-of-the-art cameras, and just said, can we film it? And I said, yes, I'd love that to happen, you know, it'd be great. And there were no rules or regulations. We just said if it turns out well, we'll do something. If not, doesn't matter, you know. And that's how it happened, really. And as I say, these things tend to evolve through cultivating relations with people, with creative people.
So, to go back to the touring again, I mean, which is something you haven't done for quite some time after you left Depeche in '95. So how is it to be back on the road again? Is it the same? I mean, obviously you're with PK, with Paul Kendall, who's the old duke of record making. I mean, he's a lovely person.
Yeah, Paul is so easy to work with and enthusiastic, and you know, we've worked together for a number of years now. And I thought he would be a great person to drag out of the studio as well and take on the road. And it was actually, for him, really his first ever tour. For me, it was quite a different experience to Depeche Mode, obviously, for many different reasons. The scale of the productions, the audiences, the venues, and a much more intimate experience for me, which can sometimes be a little bit imposing when you can see all the faces, you know, like tonight, with Depeche Mode, the crowd, you never saw the crowd. And I sort of quite liked that. It meant you could hide away, and this way I'm kind of a bit more exposed. When we first started the tour, I felt very, very self-conscious on stage. I mean, it's quite difficult anyway when you're using laptops. It's not the most visual thing you can do on stage. So we very much relied on the film to carry that through, and there we are with our laptops. So I felt self-conscious, but I relaxed much more into it as the tour went on, and I generally enjoy travelling, going to interesting cities and meeting people, so that aspect I always love. You know.
I mean, the music you were playing in the beginning, I mean, when you played a couple of years ago here in Zurich, there was mainly Recoil tracks. And now you started to using Depeche tracks as well, which obviously you altered and changed around a bit. What is that? Are they compromising, selling out? What is it?
Well, it's very seductive to see an audience react to something. And so, of course, you might say it's a little bit of an easy option to throw in some Depeche Mode music. And when you see the audience suddenly there's all this recognition, extra recognition, then you kind of enjoy it, and you want to include that. But there is a line to be drawn, and I wouldn't want to play too much on that fact. So what I tried to do was just introduce the music that A, I liked best, B, that really had the most of my influence. So the bits of Mode music you hear in there are pretty much the bits I did, if you know what I mean. The Never Let Me Down remix was mainly my work, and you know, those parts. So we can say it's Alan Wilder work, a lot of it. Obviously there's the songs to Martin. So I tried to focus on those things that I was more involved in.
There was quite a rumour in the net, especially when you performed together with Martin. I think it was a duet you did on the Children Cancer Benefits.
Teenage Cancer Trust.
Teenage Cancer Trust, that's it. And so obviously there's the rumour. Can you tell us something about this rumour?
That's an old rumour now, Rita. That's 2 years old.
Well, you know.
No, people obviously ask me that question a lot, and I never rule out collaborations with anybody. You know, you never know what's around the corner, and I try and keep a very open mind. I did a remix for Depeche, as some of you will know, quite recently. Martin came and DJ'd when we played in Los Angeles area. So, you know, there's little collaborations to be had, but it wouldn't go beyond that. Boo.
We're sorry, but there's another project you're having, which at the moment, which is it's quite interesting. Maybe you can tell us about this Talk project.
We can talk about that, and it's actually another one of these projects that evolved. It started off just as a book, and then the guy that was organising that said, well, why don't we get a few tribute tracks? Would you be interested in doing one of those? I said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. I always liked Talk. And then he kind of commandeered me into becoming a musical advisor for the whole project, and kept asking my advice on these tracks. I said, well, you better have me as a proper musical supervisor if you're going to keep asking me these questions. And then we started arguing about what were the best tracks and which were the not so good ones, and we didn't totally see eye to eye about all the controversy, because there's 30 tracks on this Talk tribute album, and I wouldn't say they're all brilliant, but I think generally speaking, the whole album is a really high quality for a tribute album. There's a lot of really interesting people on it. So I was happy to be involved in it, and it got me working and doing a couple of Recoil tracks, and I was working with 2 or 3 different vocalists on the tracks. Linton Kwesi Johnson, who's a well-known dub poet. He was very big in England in sort of around the late 70s, 80s. So he was great to work with, even though we didn't spend much time together. It was great to have him involved. And then 2 other singers, Shara Nelson, who I'd never met, and Paul Marshall, who I've never met either. We all work in the virtual world these days. So people send me their files and I put it together and we don't actually meet. So that's how it goes, isn't it?
So, well, we enter the future now, in a way. I mean, first of all, will you keep on touring, obviously, with Recoil, I guess? Or are you?
Well, I haven't got a plan to do any more touring at the moment. That largely depends on if I have enough material or any new material to rework a show in a different way. I wouldn't want to just repeat again what you've just seen, really. But it's difficult to imagine how to perform Recoil in another way without taking a whole group of musicians. I don't